Hello, everyone. It's Lisa Nirell. Welcome to Friday. It's the first Mindful Marketer live stream for September. And we are live streaming remotely for the first time ever from Atlanta, Georgia. Today's session is Bounce Back from Crisis, 4 lessons learned from a seasoned and serial entrepreneur, Michael Taylor. By the way, I want to remind everybody, it is Friday, it's almost the holiday weekend, and we are live streaming from all of your favorite outlets today. We'll be watching for you on LinkedIn Live, Facebook, and YouTube. So tell us where you're from, put your name in the comments section, and whenever you have a question, just pop it in the comments. So we'll make sure we get to as many questions as possible. Let me set this up for you of what we're covering today, and then I'll bring to the room our special guest, Michael Taylor. You all know that markets have changed dramatically in the last 6 months. Yes, we are in month number 6 of the global pandemic. Many of these changes are permanent, and some of them may be temporary. But let's face it, one thing we all share in common is we need to refresh and reboot our businesses in order to even remain relevant to our customers. We've seen some traditional industries rewire, including Papa John's Pizza that just reported a 50% increase in profit over last quarter. Now that one is kind of a softball, right? I mean, it's obvious why they're doing so well. And yet in e-learning, it is now estimated to be a $190 billion industry. We can learn from these industries as much as we can learn from telehealth, technology, warehouse, retail, and e-commerce providers as well. But you know, before you can design a bounce back company, you need to be able to design a bounce back mindset. And that's why I'm really, really happy that Michael is with us today. He's going to be sharing some powerful frameworks that he has built and cultivated over the last 30 years. And Michael is the founder of Simple Mind Incorporated. He's led strategic marketing and communications initiatives as CEO and creative director of his national brand agency. In the mid-2000s, a global consulting company acquired his agency, after which he expanded his company's reach to 12 cities across the United States and 6 countries across the globe. Companies such as Wiley, Johnson & Johnson, and Verifone have hired Michael to reboot their offerings and brands to perform in their rapidly changing markets. So I am so happy to welcome Michael Taylor. Good afternoon, Michael.
Hey, hi everybody.
So remember everybody, this is your opportunity to post questions and just tell us where you're from today, and we'll make sure that we get to them. But Michael, tell us what experiences led you to this so-called COVID crisis moment.
Well, one thing that it did, the whole pandemic, is it reminded me of some other big crises that have happened over the last 30 years. And I think if for nothing else, if you have a business for 30 years, the one thing you learn how to do is handle crisis, right? Because there's just rolling crisis of all nature coming at you. So it reminded me of some of the other big ones and the coping mechanisms that we used, and actually to not only survive, but actually some of our biggest ideas that played out fantastic. So the business itself started from a crisis. I mean, I would say that my business started when I was laid off from my magazine art director job. Just suddenly, whenever people buy magazines, the first thing they do is they clear out all the editorial staff. So, I was, swept out the room, and with no prospects and really no concept other than I was, good as time as any to start my business. I somehow figured out how to walk into a bank, talk to my dad, who was a banker, and I said, "Dad, I need to get a loan to figure this out. And my dad helped me put together a great loan and a great loan package. And I walked in and asked for $10,000. And my dad had helped me put together a loan package for getting $1 million loan. And just based on the quality of my loan package, I got my first loan, and then I haven't looked back ever since. So started in that. Then I'm thinking about a second time where we really learned a lot, which was the sort of the double whammy of the .com meltdown. And we, at that time, were 90% of our clients were .com startups. And we were heavily invested in incubators and so on. And that dried up. So we had a big crisis. And then within 10 or 12 months, we had 9/11. So we had a big, fallout, 80% of our income and stuff. And
that's a big number, 80%. So
80%.
In the .com space, you've been part of the excitement of the Atlanta startup community for a few decades now.
That's right.
Is there anything that makes this pandemic crisis different from the ones you have found a way to navigate through?
I think the difference between the pandemic now and, say, that crisis is that I think the pandemic has affected everybody deeper and more universally. I think that businesses were heavily affected in 9/11, right? And especially medium-sized business. Mine was sort of small to medium-sized business. And we got hit pretty hard, especially in the marketing world, which is, sometimes that's the first budget you cut off. So I would say that now it's more universal. I think it affects everyone equally.
It is. And as I've learned in studying some of the recent research that was published in JAMA, it's not like past crises, because there's this mindset in the world of, when is the other shoe going to drop? When is there going to be more suffering? When are we going to know who the next president is going to be? There is this constant, when's that shoe dropping? And that's heightening anxiety to a level where they found that at least 25% of United States citizens are reporting signs of depression now.
Yes. I think it's much harder to try to manage the uncertainty than it is to catastrophic and frightening events, right? I mean, at least when the .com crashed, we knew it was a .com crash. And although our income was going away, we weren't questioning everything, right? And the same thing with 9/11. It was horrific. It caught our imagination, and we all went into post-traumatic stress. But we were not everything was in play like it is now. But I think the response is, I would still say the responses that we had along the way in our other crises I still think there's a lot of lessons from that with how to handle this, right? I think the process is very similar.
Yes, you're absolutely right. And it's universal. It's not just people who are linked to the tech industry. In fact, I talk a lot about this in terms of the longer term impact of crisis in my latest blog post. So people can go to my blog, which I just posted in my little banner beneath my name. So you can go there for some really helpful research as you are saying, okay, how is this crisis different? How do I need to be different? And maybe even act differently with my business going forward. But Michael, you've got a few, by the way, we've got some people here joining us today. I'm just checking out the feed. We have Alan from San Diego, Joyce from San Antonio, Texas, and we have Allison joining us from Washington, D.C. They're all waving and checking in on us. So greetings to all of you. Remember, you can post your questions at any time. Speaking of which, Michael, you told me before this conversation that you've created a framework that's been very helpful for you to help you through these difficult times. Can you step us through that?
Sure. And I just want to use the example of that .com and 9/11 meltdown. I think that's where we really codified that process, because we had lost so much in those double crises that the first thing we had to do was stabilize, and that's the first start of the process. Which is, it's a little arrogant to think that we all can just calmly step back and scratch our beards and look at our business from a distance when stuff is on fire, right? When I had many employees who I was very close to. It was a wonderful environment. I mean, people were having babies and they were paying mortgages. It was a real business, right? Had to let them go. So I think the first step is just to acknowledge that you're probably going to be reacting. You're going to be doing the things that we instinctively want to do, which is stem the cash flow crisis, make the very hard decisions. And I would say my only advice there, at least in my own experience, is that it's better to make those hard decisions earlier rather than later, right? And go ahead and get yourself down to zero, right? Get it, or go up to zero in that case. And so that would be the first step. And that's what we did in that post 9/11 world. And then once you have some level of stability, understanding that it's tough for a while, but there's a point where, and find the earliest point that you can to step back, where you can actually step back. I don't know if you've heard before, working on the business rather than in the business, right? Which is to give yourself a little bit of a healthy distance from the situation so that you can make a clearing, step back, and be sort of almost an objective director of sorts, and have the discussions with your team. Or in my case, the team I had left, right, which were some really smart people, about what do we do now?
I want to mention, you're making a good point here, because in October, for a lot of companies, the PPP loans will have, many have they've used up their PPP loans here in the United States, and some of their cash that they needed to maintain payroll. And if people have not put in their plans, their emergency plans, or unfortunately some of their furlough or layoff plans by now, they could be left in a very vulnerable position. And I've had a number of conversations with CEOs in our community who said, I have a history of holding on to my people way too long, and I'm not doing them any service by doing so. And I'm certainly not doing my business any service by stretching things out when I know that our cash flow end is near.
Yeah, yes. And I've made some mistakes there because, we care about the folks we hire. We're very close, and, it's hard to separate what's going to happen to their lives from those decisions. And you're right. Waiting doesn't make it better. It actually sometimes deepens the crisis. So in the case of the post 9/11 issue, we were able to step back, and I was really blessed with some super smart thinkers. And we had a series of sessions, right? We were actually able to sort of step back and look at our business fresh, as if we were consultants coming into the business. And we played, we did the thing we normally do. We're big whiteboarders. We like to throw a lot of ideas out and then start, making connections. And with this crack team there was 4 of us total, we went from 12 to 4. We had a couple of ideas that really didn't point to anything yet, but they're the third step, I think, in this process, which is to take stock, look at your business in a fresh way. And when we did that, we actually had many ideas about what do we do now, right? Do we just sort of muscle through and sell the way we always did? Do we, tweak a few products and just kind of do the same thing? Do we kind of wait for things to get better and just stay lean?
Right.
Or do we actually say, what can we do in this situation that might actually be better than we were before? And it was sort of a challenge to us to sort of go, what could we do right now and not take advantage of, but pursue. And we had an operations director. His name was Paul, brilliant guy. And he has a lot of, he thinks in frameworks. And he said, I don't think we can go sell. directly to our customers who are traumatized and they've shut their budgets off. But what we might do is we might find people who are healthy in our client base. Let's look at our client base and see if we have some clients who are doing well, and then we can associate with them.
Okay,
right?
so
It's a huge
kind
idea.
of taking stock. You were taking stock of where, what do we have in front of us? What do we have? Where are some golden nuggets that we can find in this difficult moment?
That's right. And we did what we often do with our clients and still do with our clients is we sort of look at different frameworks, right? So sometimes if you can look at the same problem in different ways, you can have different ways of going to something that's useful, right? And in our case, this association idea felt like a very strong idea. So we looked at our clients, and without really knowing it, we said, here's a very strong client that's doing well. It was our agency of record global consulting company client. And we found a way to pair up with them and create what we were articulating as a third stream of revenue, right? And so a long story short is this sort of mental exercise we were doing led to the association idea, which led to us looking at one of our healthier clients and abandoning what we were doing. Organic growth was not an option. It wasn't an option. So hanging back or going at it the same way, oh, let's just work even harder, would have done nothing but exhaust us. So we went after the association idea. I talked to the CEO. We sat down and said, hey, it looks like we could create some revenue neither one of us would have gotten on our own. And let's go give it a try. And a long story short is we won a $1 million engagement within a month just from trying out the new idea. They had an IT back end and we had a front end UX experience, and we came in and won this huge global account. So anyways, that one idea, when we were sitting in step 3, which is taking stock, we had the association idea, we put it in play, and then that led to our biggest growth spurt ever.
I love it. So
yeah,
I mean, what a breakthrough that had to be for you, because that simple, we've been telling everyone we were going to share some frameworks today. So I want to make sure that we've captured the first one very well, which was step 1, you stabilized. You did have to let people go, significant number of people, and look at your free cash flow situation. Then you made a clearing and said, all right, we've got to make some white space to come up with some fresh ideas. The third thing you did was take stock of what you had, as well as the partners and alliances you had, which you called association, I think.
yes.
Fourth, you took action, you recast.
Yes.
Do you think, how many people do you think right now, and then we're going to take we've got a question here I wanted to get to.
Sure.
People do you think are still stuck in stabilize or make a clearing now that we're in month 6 of the pandemic?
Well, I don't know, but I suspect a lot of us are, right? It's tough. We're trying to sort things out, and our instinct is to use a lot of the things that have worked before, right? And so that's a very difficult thing to change, right? If you've had success for years and years and all of a sudden that doesn't work, sometimes the feeling is let's double down on the same thing. And I would say that in our case, maybe that is a solution, right? But in our case, it absolutely wasn't. As a matter of fact, the offerings that we had never ever were. They just died. They just died at that time. So we had to abandon things. So I would say in the stabilize first step that not only should you stabilize, but you should make those tough decisions as soon as possible. That means right?
I agree. We just got off our CMO planning session this week, and they were talking about a CMO in the Western United States who is in the hospitality business. And the hospitality business has been decimated.
Yes.
Right? And as Martin Lindstrom said in one of our previous live streams, airlines such as Lufthansa are predicting that it could take up to 10 years for them to get back to 2019 levels of revenue. So this hospitality company is still at month 6 of the pandemic, still trying to build their growth plan or bounce back plan around 10 different buyer personas. And we said, okay, you can't do it. You are going to be overwhelmed. So it's also a good time, like you said, to make those hard choices about what do we have to stop doing. And
That's right.
So we've got a question here from Drew. Thanks for the great discussion. What are some keys to being resilient when faced with sudden market change or crisis? And what have you learned and adapted over time? Thanks, Drew from DC.
Well, I think the make space part is a big part of it, which is sort of a practice, and that's probably I think that's your wheelhouse, Lisa, that you do very well. Is that there's business acumen, but there's also this practice of staying calm and doing what I would call staying in the director's seat. And some people call it mindfulness, some people, whatever it is, it's about being able to realize that being in a state of panic and reacting is useless. Okay, perfectly understandable, right? But there's a lot of that just it's a rope-a-dope energy dump, right? Where you're just reacting. And so I would say the biggest thing that has worked for me and us is that we have been able to stabilize quickly and then to step back and actually have a very open-minded discussion without any, let's call it holy grails, right? Actually being able to say this thing that brought us so much joy and profit, we can no longer do anymore, right? And I would say those are the big ones from my experience.
Yes, it is. It takes a lot of courage and maybe some letting go. How do we release? I would even encourage people, if you do have some of those sacred cows, or I think you mentioned, Michael, holy grails in your organization, you're going to find them. Somebody's emotionally attached to this particular offering or this particular go-to-market strategy, but it's no longer relevant. Think of, you and I have had the pleasure of working with a small B2B company that got decimated by the change in the live events business.
Yeah. And, the fourth step that we were talking about, which is recast. And I think this is really important because when you say let go of something, we're not saying that you let go of your experience and the things that you're great at and the things you're strong at. You really don't let go of those, right? In our case, we're saying we have these strengths, right? We have these strengths in understanding clients, intimacy. We have these strengths in distilling messaging and all that and strategy. Those are still very relevant. We just had to take those strengths and learn to point them in different directions, right? So it isn't about cutting off one leg to grow another. It's about going deeper in one leg and pointing it in different directions, right? And so I think that's really a really important distinction, because we're not saying that if you're if you own a restaurant chain, you have to become a movie director. We're
Right.
saying that what is your core strength? Food and tastes, right? There may be something other than a restaurant model. So I think that's an important distinction in the recasting realm. And I think that's where some of the success with the event company has been helpful.
Absolutely. They have some superpowers. They, first of all, are really good at, they have strategic thinking skills that their competitors don't have. A lot of their competitors are excellent tacticians, but they can't step back. So as you and I are noticing, because we've both been advising clients and facilitating meetings and doing keynotes for many years, and the so-called live events business may not ever come back the way it looked before COVID. And this company is brilliant at being strategic, stepping back and saying, instead of getting dragged into a technology tools evaluation for your next conference, which could go very awry, They have the ability to pull companies back and say, let's start with your strategy and your success measures first, and then focus on your hybrid or your digital event. But they're able to save clients hundreds of thousands of dollars on a bunch of tech tools that they don't necessarily need.
I think you kind of just reminded them of something they already really knew, that they were really strong at certain things. And that was still the edge, even though they've almost completely recast their business in another way, that they're taking all the things that made them differentiated and powerful in the other, and they're moving that into a different realm. So I think that's the thing where you have to keep asking, what is the core skill? And most of us will have a list of things we do, right? Well, those are the offerings on the outside. What's behind that, right? What drives those? What makes those so good, right? And then you sort of get back to the root core strength that you have and the experience that you have. Then when you get to that point, that's when you can say, how can we use that? And then that's where, and this is not easy, where you take a director's seat one step outside as if you were consulting. What do you do with this great skill and strength that you have? What can you do with that? Forget what you've done before.
Absolutely. And you've one of the things that really helped when we were working with that company that I want to highlight, and I also want people to make sure that they contact either of us through the email address or my blog that you see here on the screen. If you have to dash out to your Labor Day holiday and you miss some of this. But Michael, there's a framework, another framework that I really like that you created, which are some questions that each of us can ask as we are in this recast mode with our business right now. Can we go through those and
sure.
Some examples along the way?
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, I think as you recast, sometimes because you're so close to your own business, it's hard to do that in a, let's say, an objective way. So I found the best way to talk about the value of your business is to actually stand in your client's shoes as best you can and look back in, right, somehow. So I would say the first question to ask is, what are the new realities your customers, in this case, in the pandemic, over the next 12 and 24 months, right? Instead of focusing so much on yourself, focus really, really deep on the situation that your clients are in. You may find some powerful insights there, right, by being more intimate with them. So the first question is, what new realities are your customers facing over the next 12 to 24 months? And then following that, it's like, how do these realities affect their business, right? Maybe you ask, how does it affect yours? But I really want to emphasize the outside in questioning, because I think it really helps you, forces you into a more objective mode where you can look back in. So the second one is, how does that affect their business? And this is where you get into what we're talking about, number 3, which is what pre-pandemic skills and offerings still seem to have the same value, still fit, or are easily adapted to the new market. So that's 3. Then 4, what are the new skills or offerings? What are the things that you need to bone up on, get better at, and maybe even when you're ready to hire again, you start hiring towards that? What kind of approaches or methods of delivery do you need to learn or tweak, right, to address this new reality? And again, I would stress, look at least from your outside in standpoint as the inside out. And the other one is, and I think this is a very broad question, but it's like, what can you offer right now to help your clients transition to the new world? One thing that we have been doing for the last 6 months, if we've sort of set aside this, we really got to make some money, we got to sell some projects, and we thought, we don't know any more than anyone else what the future holds, right?
Yeah, welcome to the world of uncertainty and ambiguity, right? Well, I mean, could we have a little more on the side of uncertainty and a side dish of ambiguity? Because we don't have enough of that right now.
Okay, so the very least we have in common is, we can totally relate to that, right? We can have some theories and all, but we don't know any better than, but we do know that we have some great client relationships, trusting relationships, and then we care about each other. You know what I'm saying? It's over the years we've developed. It's a family thing, right? And so one of the first things we did is said, let's. Of course, we have to make money, but let's not worry about that so much. Let's think about what can we do? What are the skills that we have where we can help our clients? And that has been really wonderful. Not only just it feels good, but we're actually starting to get projects, and that was a secondary thing. But the one thing that in our case, we're quite good at facilitation. We're quite good at organizing these sessions that I'm talking about, where you sort of think about different frameworks and you look at problems from different angles, and then and so we thought, why don't we just offer to virtually facilitate our clients through the same processes that we do in messaging and marketing and stuff? Why don't we just help them sort out what they're to do? And that was great. It was wonderful. And it actually, it's just had some wonderful effect. It's motivating to actually step back a couple of notches, and it helps to have a third party help you through it. So, in our case, that was something we started right away.
Right.
We started engaging with our clients, and we learned a lot about what they're going through. And by osmosis, we started to have a pretty good idea of what we needed to offer. We have some very targeted things now that are pretty relevant.
Yes, and thanks to you and some of your business partners, one of the first things I did, and I hope this, by the way, if you forget everything else from today's live stream, I hope you'll remember this, is that this is the time to surround yourself with lifelong learners, people who are willing to experiment with things, knowing full well some of them may not work out. But one of the first things I remember very clearly, Michael, was when you pulled together a couple of other consulting firms, and we all got together and we said, we need to become better facilitators behind a screen. And we spent hours just learning the fundamentals of engaging people using Zoom.
That's right.
Never forget, like the first 60 days when I was running the marketing leaders live meetings behind a screen and our peer group meetings, people's jaws were dropping. These are billion-dollar, top-notch, number one in their market companies that contacted me after our meetings and said, how did you do breakout sessions? How did you pull up that whiteboard so we could all participate? So it wasn't just a bunch of people, on the Hollywood Squares screen, just listening to a speaker for 45 minutes, droning on.
Yeah. And, in that sort of, we're doing, right, we're practicing what we're preaching, thankfully, which is, so we have, right, so we're all stepping back. Yes, of course, we're all going virtual, right? Duh. It's like saying you have a phone. I mean, everybody has a phone. That's not enough. It isn't enough to say, hey, we're virtual now, right? You have to dig farther than that and say, first of all, we know that there's things in live events that are just not going to be as good in Zoom. They're just not, right? Give it up. Don't try to match the experience. But there actually are some things that we found that are better in a virtual environment, right? There's some efficiencies. There's polling. For example, at a live event, you have limitations based on budgets, based on space, based on physical parameters. How many people can we pay to fly to Los Angeles and so on? But guess what? You can do the same conference and have 10,000 people on it with only incrementally more cost. So you can serve more people in the same conference faster and easier. So that's just one example, and there's many. So I would say that when you have this reframing and recasting conversation, I think it's good to say, yeah, we want to survive, but we also want to find something that's better. And I found that's a nice factor to that recasting process. We're not just trying to, stay above water and swim. Of course we are, right? But we also want to say there may be some opportunities now that there weren't before. And I've found that there always are. Yes. But it takes a certain kind of you got to make some weird connections sometimes, right?
You really do. I mean, You have to look at people who are willing to also, for all of you who are watching, that work for a company, that are executives in a company. Sometimes you got to be willing to get fired over it and say, I'm going to go experiment with this. I don't know if it's going to work, but please give me some latitude and autonomy to go try this out. You and I have spoken about Scott Galloway, who's the NYU, New York University Stern School of Business professor. And here's a man who is in the maelstrom of total higher education disruption that's happening right now.
He's awesome. Yeah.
We could go on for hours about
He's a freight train.
He's a freight train. And, here's Scott Galloway, who came to academia from the corporate world. So I give him great respect. I respect his opinions. And he is critiquing he's biting the hand that feeds him, known as his employer at NYU Stern. But he's saying, here are all the reasons that higher education, especially tier 2 and tier 3 colleges and universities, are so broken and so full of hubris for overcharging, price increases of 1,140%, when inflation's only been about 140% in the last 10 years. What a ridiculous pricing model. How could, at some point, somebody like Google had to step in and come out with a number of certification programs for $100 a month that people could step into and, matriculate in a much more cost-effective way. So,
yeah.
And how can we put on our Scott Galloway mask and get the courage? As we wrap up in the last 2 minutes or so, I want to quickly, Michael, tell everybody this is your last chance to post your questions. And let's kind of wrap up with how do we put on our Scott Galloway game face and find things we can offer right now to help our clients transition to this new world?
Yeah, I would say, for one, and I may be overreaching here, but I think we're in a farm to factory transition. I think we're in a similar change, and this happened before the pandemic, by the way. I think the pandemic just accelerated things that were already in place. I think we're in a farm to factory change, right? Late 1800s, early 1900s, what happened? The farms, the labor on farms was the majority, and all of a sudden, the entire world was moving into factories, creating things, and off the farm. And that was incredibly disorienting. And there was a lot of the same pain that we have now. And I would say that even if it is a little bit overreaching to say, if you could just step a little bit outside of the situation, right? And say, yes, the pandemic's unique, but it's not so much in our recent history. If you look back and say, and if you look back to the farm to factory movement, there were some huge winners that came out of that, right? And I bet, I'm not saying they followed the 4 steps we had here, but I bet they did some of that. I bet there were people saying this amazing transformation that's going on, as painful as it is, there are so many opportunities that were not there before that happened. And I would say that's a really wonderful mindset to put on. And so if you can even put a little bit of that on, you'll actually start to make connections that you wouldn't make with a survival mentality. So that, I would just say that it's horrible. We're all going through it. We all have the uncertainty, but you're going to make better connections, and there absolutely are opportunities that weren't there before. And yeah.
And I can imagine in a lot of industries, you will have peers and competitors who are stuck in so much navel gazing that they will miss those opportunities because they are not out visiting customers, getting understanding from an empathic standpoint. What are they experiencing right now? How can we relieve some of that pain that they're going through in a way that nobody else is doing? And I can guarantee you, Michael, that in any industry right now, many of our competitors are going to be stuck in this navel gazing, managed through the balance sheet, not through the value creation lens. And they're going to miss out on once in a lifetime. The last thing I'll also mention as we wrap is there is an openness I haven't seen in 30 years from people, from our customers who are saying, yeah, bring it on. Let's try something new. This is the time.
Yeah.
So if we don't try it now, whether it's a year from now or 2 years from now, whenever COVID takes a break, our customers will not have this openness to new ideas and change. So I'm going to leave it with that. And one more question from Cindy in San Diego. By the way, we also have Tommy from Sweden joining us.
Awesome.
We have Bill from Dallas. Cindy has a question. How do you find the energy to do what you know you need to do? What a perfect question to wrap up our session today.
Okay, I will tell you for me, all right, and I'm a little bit of an odd bird sometimes, but I cannot disconnect how I feel physically from how I feel mentally. So when the pandemic hit and we all went into our lockdown, I realized I was doing a lot of sitting around and I just was starting to feel stagnant, like probably a lot of us. So I actually kind of doubled down on getting in shape and doing things that I wasn't doing even before, which is regulating my sleep, having a routine, eating healthier food and all that. Because for me, if you don't feel good, and you know, when you're hit with a crisis, our brains use so much energy, they can drag us physically down, right? It takes the energy down. So I would say that, you know, the stuff your grandmother would tell you to do is quite good, you know, and some, let's say, new age grandmother, drink more water. But I think keeping yourself not only as physically fit as before, but maybe get more so. And then there's something for me that helps a lot because it clears my excess nervous energy. I don't know if that answered your question, but that's how I do it. And it really does help.
Yes. And Cindy, I have to tell you, I have a laundry list of self-care habits that I do every day, whether I'm on the road, as I am here in Atlanta this week, or whether I'm at home. And if you're interested, anyone watching this, drop me an email. I'll send you my favorite list of habits and routines. I think as a distributed world, it's often easy to not feel connected and to give up rituals. But I'm a huge believer in rituals for myself and rituals with the people I love. So on that note, I want to say, Michael, this has been a terrific session today on how, maybe not how we bounce back, but how we bounce forward. What do you say?
I like that. Yeah, that's fun.
As we all go into the weekend, let's talk about bouncing forward.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Great. Well, how can people best reach you, Michael?
They could just go to my website at simplemind.com, simplemindinc.com, or I don't know if you put my
I did.
Contact info. Yeah, just straight ahead. Get me from the website or my email address. I'm easy to get.
Excellent. Excellent. Excellent.
Enjoyed it.
We really had a great time today. And for those who were furiously writing all the frameworks that we discussed, we had 2 really powerful, proven frameworks. Remember, just drop us an email and we'll be happy to send those to you at any time. And for
Absolutely.
those who missed a piece, you can always go to my website, lisanirell.com. There's an events page, and we put all of our replays there and on our YouTube channel. So feel free to go back when you need to. I also want to say, Michael, thank you. I have learned so much from you, and it's just been a joy collaborating on this and other ventures. So here's to bouncing forward in the future.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
And before we leave, everybody, remember, we live stream the first 3 Fridays of the month from 1:30 to 2:10 p.m. We run over sometimes, but you know, we're bouncing forward. And in any case, know that next week is September 11th. We have a very special program with General John Nicholson. We're going to be talking in honor of 9/11 about entrepreneurship during the COVID era, is with a special eye on what the PenFed Foundation is doing to help and cultivate entrepreneurship for veterans. So if you care about entrepreneurship, as I know you did today, be sure to join us on September 11th, 1:30 p.m. Eastern Time. And until then, be safe and be sane, and we'll see you.